election. Like, say Kim Davis says, I'm not going to sign off on that, and no one does anything about it, you know, or I don't know. So, but so how did we get to that point? So I think that's probably good you called me out on that, because what are they doing actually? How are they violating the law? Political outsiders. Well, they're definitely disrespecting the rule of law, right?
Well, not yet. They're just talking about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess they're just talking about disrespecting it.
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they take a traditional.
Is that harmful to advocate things like that to society?
I don't think so.
To send a message? No, it's okay. Check out. Disregard.
Wasn't that check out and disregard?
Yeah.
I don't think that's the message they're sending, but I mean wasn't that like Obama's like initial campaign though, right? Change. I mean, it's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay to want to change the way things are done. I don't know.
But through democratic processes, right? Not through threats of boycott or whatever. I don't know. But hey, filibustering is part of the process. Yeah.
I was gonna say maybe certain candidates don't see them as just laws, and they follow the traditional natural law approach, and an unjust law is not a law, and I don't know, maybe in that viewpoint they're not breaking. I don't know if they've thought that through, but it'd be interesting if they did.
Flip side, looking at maybe instead of from a negative angle, from a positive angle. When Bush and Gore were running for president, and you had the dispute over the hanging chads, the Florida, the vote, right? And there was a question of who won the election, and it had to go to the Supreme Court to say, because Gore won the popular vote, but then the outcome hinged on one state. And within that state, the votes were so highly controversial, right? And so the Supreme Court, it went to the Supreme Court. They decided in favor of Bush. The end. Everybody walked away because it went through the process. Whether it was right, wrong, rigged, whatever, I mean, that was the final say. That was the word. And maybe same thing on gay marriage. There's so much anger over that decision on both sides. Hey, what do you do now? It's gone through the system. So at least we can say, well, justice is done.
I think it was nice how Al Gore he lost in the Supreme Court vote, but he kind of respected the decision, and because if he didn't, then it would have been anarchy, sort of.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of the beauty of the system. I don't know. What do y'all think? Yeah. Some outcomes just don't seem fair, but you accept it, right? Yeah.
I think it's like she was saying, just that it's not about that individual person's outcome, it's about the system is fair.
Yes. Yeah.
And at least not every outcome will be fair, but the system should be fair.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because obviously, if you're on the losing end of the outcome, you probably don't think the outcome is fair.
Yeah. Take any family law case. That somebody's going to feel like they lost, and somebody's going to feel like they won. Yeah.
And I'm guessing a lot of people feel like on both sides that I think a lot of times there's no winner.
Mm-hmm.
So
the lawyers.
The lawyers,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's do articles for 5 minutes, and then we'll go a little bit early. How does that sound? So, Supreme Court prepares to take on politically charged cases. This is an interesting article because it kind of outlines the new Supreme Court term. The Supreme Court term starts in October of every year. So now we have the The new court opened up on Monday. That marked the start of Chief Justice John Roberts' second decade. Can you believe he's already been there for 10 years? Hard to imagine. It seems like he just got there. And will reveal whether the last term's leftward drift and acrimony were anomalies or something more lasting. But what I found fascinating about this article is the fact that, okay, well, I'll just read you my underlined stuff. The court will decide major cases on politically charged issues, including the fate of public unions and affirmative action in higher education. It will probably hear its first major abortion case since '07, and it will revisit the clash between religious liberty and contraception coverage. That's a lot of, there's a capital case there are hearing issues on. All right, so anyway, by the time the next president is inaugurated, Justice Stephen Breyer will be 78, Scalia and Kennedy will be 80, and Ginsburg will be 83. Wow. Isn't that something? So this coming term will again put into focus that the court is divided along partisan lines and that the 2016 presidential elections will be hugely consequential in shaping constitutional and other law for perhaps a generation or more. That's something to think about, that we could see turnover on the court for justices, just given their age. Yeah, the current court, and this is what I found most interesting about this article, is the first in history split along partisan lines, where the party of the president who appointed each justice is a reliable predictor of judicial ideology. That's crazy, isn't it? So if that's the trend, that whoever is the president has the power to appoint the Supreme Court, which it's always been that way, but for the first time ever, the justices are voting along those partisan lines for the president who appointed them. Like that, to me, that's bad. Like, you want to appoint a judge who's just going to be fair, right? Not who's going to be ideological. Or not, do we? Or don't we? But doesn't that make the stakes of this presidential election all the more higher, more important? And it makes me kind of, I'm traditionally a liberal person. It makes me want to be a little more conservative. I don't want judges that are just going to be doing willy-nilly stuff. I want conservative judges. I don't want activist judges. Especially if they can be there for a while. Yeah. They can be there for 30 or 40 years or more. That's crazy. So, so this is like, whew, so interesting. So, let's see. As a consequence of the current alignment, the Roberts Court has generated more marquee decisions divided by party alignment than all other courts combined. So that's going to be interesting. And some of the cases that are coming out, let's see, the court, and it talks about the different issues, like the different cases. Like one is the affirmative action in the Fisher versus UT case. There's a case on Voting Rights Act, which is so interesting, and it goes to the principle of one person, one vote. And what's at issue is the court has never resolved whether state voting districts should have the same number of people, including unauthorized immigrants, children, and others not eligible to vote, or the same number of voters. Allowing states to count only voters would in many parts of the country shift political power from cities to rural areas, a move that would generally benefit Republicans. So I guess the issue is voting districts are now divided by population, right? Sheer population. The issue in front of the court is whether to draw voting districts just on eligible voters. So you couldn't count people who aren't eligible to vote, like cities with large concentrations of illegal immigrants, or says here, children or others not eligible to vote.
Mhm.
What do y'all think about that?
I think we generally think about it as immigrants, but when you think about it as counting children, too, just shifting, thinking about those two things separately, areas with a lot of children have different concerns than people that are not, and yet, just because there's a lot of children, that may not line up with registered voters.
Exactly.
Or eligible voters even, well, already right off the bat, because the number of people versus eligible voters is going to be diluted by the children.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So to me, that kind of disenfranchises. I don't know. Like that's to me, it's interesting, and I haven't thought through the issue, but I think it is an interesting issue because it's going to shift political power. It says here, from cities to rural areas. Because in rural areas, I mean, I haven't thought about the practicality of it, like how it would do that. But you can't count ineligible voters in your population count for at least dividing up districts.
You know, it's interesting. I remember reading Bush v. Gore in constitutional law, and I guess one of the myriad issues in that case is the uniform system of elections, and you want it to be consistent. I mean, it goes back to justice, right? You want it to be fair, and I forgot which side because it's such a complicated case. I think it might have been the losing side said, or maybe it was the Bush side, I don't know, so that every U.S. election in history has been non-uniform. If you think about it, every state has their own procedures, and I mean, and it's complicated because then the counter argument to that is like, well, you can't just have a uniform system. It's different populations, geographic area doesn't indicate things, and it's a complicated issue.
It is complicated.
Yeah.
Okay, so now death penalty, that's on the table. Oh, in the abortion context, there's a challenge to a Texas law that threatens to reduce the number of abortion clinics in the state to about 10 from more than 40. So then, because they're requiring that all clinics meet the standards for ambulatory surgical centers regarding buildings, equipment, and staffing. So if you require abortion clinics to basically be like a hospital, then that will reduce the number of abortion clinics in Texas from 40 to 10. So then the case is under pre-existing Supreme Court law, does that place an undue burden? Where you would have to drive across the entire state of Texas to get to some place where you can have an abortion, right? So, but that's an interesting.
What would Fuller say, like with his 8 elements for kind of a natural perspective? I don't know, natural law perspective.
Well, it says validly cited law, yeah. I wrote in here, wouldn't this require outlawing midwives? Like if the idea of women's health care or abortion laws in general, the stated legislative purpose is health of the woman, right? So they're requiring abortion clinics to be like little mini hospitals, Well, how could a midwife, how could delivering a baby at somebody's house, how could that be healthy? Or at least in the context of, I mean, that's like, I don't know, to me that's the hypocrisy of it. Like the purpose behind the law really isn't women's health. saying that, but it isn't. Does somebody disagree with me?
I'll say something interesting. So in the Theaetetus, Socrates says that he's a midwife for ideas.
Oh, he's a midwife
Yeah.
for ideas? Yeah, right, yeah.
I think that's cool.